The day my mother threw a party to celebrate kicking me out, she hung a banner over the garage that read "Goodbye Freeloader." I sat in my car for a full minute before anyone even noticed I had arrived. The heat inside the car was thick enough to taste. Country music was blasting from a cheap speaker somewhere in the backyard. Smoke from the grill drifted across the front yard like fog. And I could hear laughter before I even opened the door. Not the kind of laughter you hear at a happy cookout, the kind that comes right before someone throws something at you. Before I go any further, if you love real, raw stories about family secrets and the moment everything falls apart, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to Anonymous Confessions. Trust me, you are not going to believe what happened next. My Uncle Rob was the first to see me. He was already drunk, red-faced, holding a beer bottle like it was a microphone. He squinted toward my car and shouted loud enough for the neighbors to hear that maybe now, finally, my mother could stop feeding a grown woman who never built a real career. Someone laughed. Someone else said I should be ashamed. Then something soft and greasy hit the side of my car and slid down the door. It was my younger brother, Tate. He was doubled over by the cooler, pointing at the smear on my paint and yelling that there was my last free meal. Even the kids from next door started laughing. Children learn very quickly what kind of cruelty gets approved by the adults around them. I stepped out of the car, and the whole backyard seemed to go quiet for just a second. Plates clinked. A lawn chair scraped against the patio. Somebody muttered, "There she is, my mother, Dana." Turned from the grill with a pair of tongs in one hand and the exact smile she always wore when she thought she had total control of the room. She looked beautiful in that cold, deliberate way. White shorts, gold hoop earrings, perfect hair. Her sunglasses sat on top of her head like a crown. She spread her arms like she was welcoming an honored guest. "Look who finally came to collect her junk," she called out. A few people laughed harder. And that was the moment I realized something terrible and true. I had spent years making their lives easier, quieter, more stable. But all it took was one banner and a few ugly jokes for them to decide I had always been the burden. I did not yell back. I did not cry. I walked past all of them and into the house. The music from outside sounded muffled through the walls. The kitchen still smelled like the expensive lemon cleaner I had bought last month because my mother claimed money was tight but always wanted the good stuff. I moved through the hallway to the mudroom where my last box sat on the bench. There was a plastic grocery bag on top of it with a note written in thick black marker. "Starter kit." Inside the bag were instant noodles, dryer sheets, a half-used bottle of dish soap, and a printed list of cheap apartment complexes in the area. It was so childish I almost laughed. They had planned every little detail. I picked up the box, tucked it against my hip, and walked back through the kitchen. When I stepped outside again, the crowd fell into that hungry half-silence people get when they think the real show is about to start. My Uncle Rob raised his beer and shouted that my poor mother had carried me long enough. Then he said something about my late father being ashamed if he could see me now. My father had been dead for 8 years. Rob smiled while he said it. Tate grabbed another hot dog. My mother did not stop any of it. She just stood there with her tongs, chin lifted, letting the moment happen. Because leadership in a toxic family is often just permission for everyone else to be as cruel as they want. I set the box in my trunk. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and turned toward the garage. I framed the banner, the people standing under it, my mother by the grill, Rob on the patio, Tate near the cooler. I took one clear photo. My mother saw me and frowned. "What is that for?" she asked. "Your pity diary." I looked straight at her. "No," I said. "For later." Then I got into my car, backed out of the driveway, and left without another word. They were still laughing when I turned the corner. 2 weeks later, my phone would light up with messages from all 3 of them begging me to call back. But in that moment, they thought they had won. Here is the version my family told everyone. I was almost 30, and married, living at home, working from a laptop doing a job none of them respected. In their story, I had returned home after life failed to launch. I stayed too long. I contributed too little. That story played extremely While at church lunches and under passive-aggressive comments on social media where people love phrases like tough love. But the truth was less tidy and much less flattering. 3 years earlier, my mother's rental company had started bleeding money in a way she would never admit. On paper, it looked healthy. The trucks had decals, the warehouse had a polished reception area, but inside, it was chaos held together by denial. Inventory was miscounted constantly. Deposits were logged inconsistently. Vendor bills got paid late and then blamed on clerical errors. If you are enjoying this story, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. And if you have ever been the one holding a family together behind the scenes, comment your own story below. Anonymous Confessions is a place for all of us. My job was not glamorous enough for my family to respect. I worked remotely as an operations coordinator. I helped small businesses fix broken processes, track compliance deadlines, and catch the kind of administrative mistakes that cost people real money. I was very good at systems. I could take a mess of missing records and turn it into something somebody could actually follow. That made me valuable to strangers and almost invisible to my own family. My mother saw me working from a laptop in a quiet room and decided that meant my labor was somehow less real than hers. At first, I only meant to help temporarily. She asked me to look over some invoices. I fixed one overdue account. Then I found a delivery contract with incorrect pricing. Then I realized deposits had been recorded without being properly reserved against upcoming purchase orders. Every time I fixed one thing, two more surfaced behind it. I paid more than people knew. I covered software renewals when accounts declined. I paid a warehouse utility balance to prevent a lockout. I floated replacement costs for damaged linens. I advanced fuel money when the company card kept declining. I sent my brother money for rent twice because my mother said business was weird. He never repaid me. The more I helped, the less visible my effort became. My mother would make comments like, "Must be nice to work in pajamas." Then an hour later, she would ask me to rewrite an angry email to a venue manager because she did not want to sound unprofessional. The truth my family never told anyone was simple. If I had not been there, the company would have collapsed years earlier. What changed everything was not another insult or another request for money. It was the moment I realized my mother genuinely believed her own version of reality. She believed the roof over my head erased every dollar I had poured into that house and business. She believed she had carried me, and once she believed that deeply enough, humiliating me in public became not just acceptable but righteous. So I did the one thing she could not charm or shout over. I made documentation. My revenge did not begin with screaming. It began with spreadsheets, bank statements, saved texts, and old emails. I built a timeline going back almost 30 months. Every time I covered a business shortfall, it went into a file. Every subscription renewal, every fuel transfer, every vendor deposit. Every call from my mother asking me to fix one small thing. That was never actually small. The total made me stare at the screen for a full minute without moving. Business support alone had crossed $94,000. Direct family support pushed it past $17,000. And even that was incomplete because unpaid labor is always undervalued when the person doing it is a daughter instead of a consultant. The irony hit me so hard I nearly laughed. The woman my family called a freeloader had quietly been functioning as the unpaid operations backbone of the business they mocked her in. Around that same time, a client offered me a longer contract, enough to rent my own place. I signed the contract before telling a single soul. I found a one-bedroom apartment outside Charlotte. Nothing fancy, clean complex, good parking. In unit washer and dryer, the kind of place you choose not because it impresses anyone, but because your nervous system recognizes quiet when it sees it. I started moving my things out in batches so small nobody noticed. By the time my mother cornered me in the kitchen with her official announcement, most of what mattered to me was already gone. She chose a Wednesday morning. She said she had been thinking a lot and had decided the healthiest thing for both of us was for me to leave by Saturday. She talked about boundaries. She talked about personal growth. She said no respectable man wanted a woman who still leaned on her mother at 29. I let her finish. Then I asked only one question. Do you want me gone, or do you want a show when I leave? The smirk that touched the corner of her mouth told me everything. Maybe both, she said. That was the moment the last of my guilt disappeared. She did not want resolution. She wanted a spectacle. I nodded like a woman too ashamed to fight, but by Friday evening, I had removed my card from every backup billing method. I disconnected my login from their scheduling platform. I did not sabotage anything. I simply stopped preventing consequences. Saturday. I drove back for the last box. I did not know she had planned the barbecue. I did not know there would be a banner. But once I saw it all, everything clicked into place. She thought she was documenting my failure. She did not realize I had already documented hers. After I left, the first 3 days were silent. Nobody called. They thought I would be ashamed, maybe cry in some parking lot, then eventually come crawling back. Monday, a venue warned that the insurance file on record had expired. Tuesday. The scheduling software went dark because the backup card had been removed. Wednesday, my mother called with a voice so soft it would have fooled a stranger. Honey, call me back. There is some confusion. Confusion. Not thanks. Not I realize what you have done for years. Confusion. By Thursday, Rob left a rambling voicemail swearing he had not meant what he said at the barbecue and asking if I could just spot the company enough to get through the weekend. Friday. My brother called in a voice stripped of all swagger. He needed money for rent. Mom could not help. Business was weird. I asked him if he knew why. He did not answer. Instead, he asked what exactly I had been paying for. I sent one cropped screenshot. Underneath I wrote, since everyone is suddenly interested in contribution. He went silent for hours. Then he texted, what is this? I answered, a sample. The next morning, my mother called 6 times before lunch. By the 6th voicemail, she was openly begging me to explain what I had turned off. If this is some kind of lesson, she said, fine. Lesson learned, call me. That was when I printed the full packet, 34 pages. A cover page with categories and totals, a timeline stretching back over 2.5 years, separate sections for business support, household expenses, personal transfers, unpaid labor, and emergency interventions. At the end, I placed one photo. The banner over the garage, my mother by the grill, Rob on the patio, Tate mid-laugh. We met at a diner near the interstate. My mother arrived early. Rob came with her because men like him never believe a woman is serious until another man is present to absorb the shock. I slid the packet across the table. The difference between your story and mine, I said. She opened it with the confidence of someone expecting emotional nonsense. That confidence disappeared almost immediately. Her eyes dropped to the total and then snapped back up at me so quickly it looked like the number had slapped her. She tried every defense. Families help each other, I said. When I lived in your house, you called it freeloading. When you lived off my money, it became family. She said I was still living in her house at 29. I said, if I had paid market rent to a stranger and kept my money away from your company, you would have lost that warehouse a long time ago. The only reason you got to call me a freeloader is because I loved you quietly. That line hit harder than the total. She flipped to the final page and saw the photograph. Her posture changed immediately. Not remorse. Calculation. You took this for leverage, she said. No, I said. I took it because I knew you would lie about how bad it was. Rob asked what I wanted. That was the question they all kept asking because it never occurred to them that I might not want anything from them anymore. Nothing, I said. That is what you still do not understand. I am not here to negotiate. I am here so you cannot pretend later that you had no idea what I was carrying. This story is almost over, but before we get there, if you have ever had to walk away from someone who took you for granted, hit that like button and subscribe to Anonymous Confessions. And leave a comment telling me what you would have put in that packet. I will read every single one. My mother asked the real question. How much of this can you turn back on? Not are you okay, not we were wrong. Operations. She wanted to know what systems could be revived. I answered honestly. The warehouse can stay on if you pay it today. The truck insurance will cost more now because the lapse already triggered penalties. At least 2. Planners are reconsidering. Because nobody was there to rewrite your emails. She accused me of enjoying the situation. I told her I would have enjoyed being respected before it got here. Then she asked if I wanted an apology. I said, no, distance. I stood up. She said, if you walk out now, do not expect to come back when things turn around. I picked up my keys and answered with the calmest voice I had ever used in her presence. The only reason things ever turned around in that family was because I was standing behind you holding the weight. Then I left. People still ask whether I regret not helping one last time. The question sounds compassionate, but it hides the same old trap. It assumes the most moral person in any story is always the one who sacrifices again. I do not believe that anymore. If someone calls you family only when they need your labor, your money, or your silence, they are not protecting a relationship, they are protecting a system. If a parent requires you to stay small so they can feel competent, that is not love. If a whole backyard can laugh while you are humiliated and then panic the moment your support disappears, the panic tells the truth more clearly than any apology ever could. I was never the freeloader. I was the unpaid operations manager. The hidden payroll. The quiet reason the lights stayed on. My mother's greatest mistake was not throwing that barbecue. It was believing the daughter she humiliated would still return once the bills came due. So no. I do not regret leaving. I regret staying long enough to confuse being useful with being loved. I regret every time I translated their cruelty into stress. Every time I called neglect exhaustion. Every time I let shelter erase debt in my own mind. But I will never regret the photo, the silence, the packet, the distance, or the day she begged 2 weeks later. By then, it was already too late. And that is the end of my story. So that is what happened, the end.